Live. Live, go.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to our first board meeting of 2021. Happy New Year to all. I know that we would rather meet face to face, but under present circumstances, we have limitations on how we are able to meet. Let us call this meeting to order. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. The Durham District School Board acknowledges that many Indigenous nations have long-standing relationships, both historic and modern, with the territories upon which our school board and schools are located. Today, this area is home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island. We acknowledge that the Durham region forms a part of the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, the Mississauga peoples, and the treaty territory of the Chippewas of Georgina Island First Nation. It is on these ancestral and treaty lands that we teach, we learn, and we live. We will now have our national anthem.
Épopée
des plus brillantes exploits.
God keep our land.
Glory of saints free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for
Thank you. That was extremely well done. I thoroughly enjoyed that. We have an agenda in front of us. Could I have a motion to approve that agenda? Linda Stone, seconded by Christine Thatcher. All those in favor? Thank you. We have 3 sets of minutes in front of us. I'm looking for one motion to receive the minutes from November 16 and November 23, and to approve the draft minutes of December the 7th. Could I have a motion for those? Thank you, Christine Thatcher, seconded by,
No.
oh, Christine, you have a question?
Yes, Chair Morton,
Yes.
I just wanted to direct you to the draft minutes of the board meeting of December the 7th. And I do have some changes, amendments to those minutes.
Could we hear what the change would be?
On page 19, Trustee Donna Edwards was nominated for the position of Vice Chair of the Standing Committee. She declined the nomination. The change would be that she declined the nomination.
I'm looking at page 19. Could you tell me exactly where I'm going to find that on page 19?
Yes, it would be just below the mid part of the page, that trustee Donna Edwards be nominated. And below that, it should read that trustee Edwards declined the nomination.
Okay, I'm sure that it will be added. So
And
that
then-
agenda could be amended. Thank you for
Thank
bringing
you.
that to
And
our.
Chair Morton, and then below that, trustee Barnes then would be acclaimed.
Thank you. So the word elected would be changed to acclaimed.
Yes, thank you.
I'm thinking everyone would be in agreement with those amendments. Thank you kindly. So
Chair Morton,
Yes.
as there'll be two different motions because the first terms are be approved where the second would be approved as a revised. I think you should deal with them separately. I also have an additional change to the December 7th meeting.
Could you tell us what your change would be?
On page 25, around the nominations of the Code of Conduct, I nominated trustee Barrett, who declined the nomination.
Okay. I'm thinking that that can be amended as well. So we've got two amendments. Are there objections to those? Seeing none, thank you. So I will be asking for two motions then. The first motion would be to receive the approved minutes of November 16th and November 23rd. Could I have that motion, please? If you could put a yes or a hand up in the participants, that would make it much easier for me to see. Thank you, Michael Barrett. And then I'm looking for a motion to approve the amended draft minutes from December the 7th. Could I have somebody pass that motion?
Sorry, Chair Morton. I think we need a
Yeah.
seconder for the receipt of the 2 minutes, and then we need to vote on to receive.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention. Going back to receiving the approved minutes of November 16th, November 23rd, the motion was put forward by trustee Barrett. Could I have a seconder for that? Trustee Lundquist, thank you. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on to the amended draft minutes of December the 7th. I'm looking for a motion to approve those minutes. And I see the hand of trustee Lundquist, seconded by trustee Templeton. All those in favor?
For clarification, Chair, sorry, I don't mean to be a pain, but
Okay.
was the motion to approve the minutes or to approve the minutes as
Amended.
amended? Okay, thank
The
you.
amendment with those two amendments
Thank
made.
you.
Sorry, it would be with 3 amendments made, yes?
Correct, right,
Okay.
with the amendments made. So that motion to approve came from trustee Lundquist, seconded by, was that trustee Templeton? Trustee Barnes? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on. It has not been brought to my attention that we have any community presentations. I'm going to Director Nora Marsh for ministry memorandums.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Morton, bring you up to date in terms of some ministry communication that we've received that I think is relevant to interests of the board. The first is that the ministry is now making a compulsory mandatory masking for grades 1 to 3, and will still encourage masking in kindergarten. So I know that particular policy was of interest to the board and wanted to make sure you're aware that we did receive that memo. They said that there would be further guidelines coming forward, but we have not yet received those guidelines. Also wanted to let you know that they have committed to expanding the asymptomatic testing that has occurred in some hotspots within the province. We don't have any details yet in terms of where they'll be expanding that testing to. We do know that in the areas that they had previously done it, it showed that approximately 2% of those tested were positive despite not having symptoms. So there will be more to come on that, but wanted to make sure you were aware that that is their plan in terms of testing moving forward. They have, and we'll talk a little bit more about the current situation in terms of the lockdown, but they have indicated that you may recall we were shut down originally at elementary only until the 11th. They then changed that to January 25th. This Wednesday, we've received word that we'll know on Wednesday whether or not the current situation will extend until February 10th. At this stage, we don't know that, but they've indicated in memo that we'll find that out. Also wanted to let you know that in memo, they have informed us that they have included education workers, that's all workers in the education sector, as a prioritized for the immunization, and will therefore be considered a priority within phase 2 of the rollout of the immunization plan in the province of Ontario. It's a fairly wide window in terms of phase 2. It begins in March or April and could extend to August, but they have identified, and this is the first time in terms of education workers being included as considered essential workers and phase 2 testing. The other item isn't related to pandemic, but did want to include it because of its significance, and that is the ministry has started to roll out more information and some opportunities for district training in relation to the new grade 9 math curriculum. You may recall that they are eliminating the course types in grade 9 math from applied and academic to a course in mathematics. And so in February, they'll begin some system engagement. However, we don't have any more details in terms of the content of that curriculum yet, but wanted to make sure you're aware of that memo as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All very important announcements. And I'm going to go to Trustee Lundquist because I think she has a question.
I do. Thank you, Chair Morton. So it's a question arising from the first part of that report. And I'm just wondering if we know if there are any students in the system that don't have devices or access to Wi-Fi at this stage. I'm just curious because if it's extending even further, do we have students that don't have the tools they need to be learning?
Thank you for the question. On the agenda under item, the director's update on lockdown in schools, we will be discussing technology deployment a little bit further, but the answer is we're deploying so that there's currently 1 device per family and 1-to-1 device grades 7 to 12. So one of the things that I was planning on sharing as part of that report is we know with the synchronous learning occurring that it may be that there needs to be some sharing of devices depending on the access families have. We have collected the information in terms of what 1-to-1 deployment would look like. However, we don't have the devices to satisfy that requirement. We've raised this through the Ministry of Education in terms of a concern of the expectation for synchronous learning to be occurring when we know not all children have 1-to-1 access. And the commitment has been that there would be further funding for technology from the province. However, the funding is not the primary barrier, although that's one of the barriers. The more relevant barrier currently is the fact that there is a shortage of Chromebooks provincially, and we're not able to access them. Our orders have been delayed, and so we're in a waiting game in terms of receiving more. We did get one of our shipments this month, and so we're very pleased about that. And so we've been able to do the deployment, and we did last weekend, for example, those families who indicated they didn't have any device, we did do a deployment then.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Trustee Stone. I think she has a comment or a question. Trustee
Thank you,
Stone.
and thank you, and through you, Chair. Director Marsh, it was about the asymptomatic testing. I've heard differing reports about whether or not people who are asymptomatic are still able to pass on the virus. Do you know what the ministry says about that?
I haven't had a detailed conversation about it. If it rolls out in Durham, I think that would be an opportunity for us to engage very closely with the health department and make sure that those questions are asked of the medical professionals and provided.
Thank you. Moving on to the public question period. No questions have been brought to my attention, but if there are any, now would be the time. Seeing none, I'm going to go on to the director's update on lockdowns and schools. Back to Director Marsh.
Thank you very much, and through you, Chair Morton. As I have previously indicated, you're aware of the current status in terms of our schools. We are certainly waiting to hear what will be announced on Wednesday in terms of whether or not we'll be delayed in terms of students returning to in-person learning. I want to acknowledge that during this period, unlike previous times, we have two models running. One, of course, is the remote learning that is serving the vast majority of our students. However, this time with the ministry direction, it did specify that for students with unique special education needs who weren't able to access remote learning because of their educational needs, that we would have our schools open and have staff serving those students. So it, I think, has been a challenge for the system to adapt to the two models running and understand the increased complexity involved for the staff who are serving in person currently. We are continuing to work with them in terms of providing support. One of the areas that came up initially, for example, was the lack of access to childcare because elementary schools are closed, and for those staff expected to be in person at schools who also have their children at home. And so the Ministry of Education did provide for them to be included in the list of individuals who qualify for the emergency child care during this period. So all those staff who are involved in the schools being open, that would be custodians, the office staff, the administrators, as well as the educators in those classrooms. We have, of our 15,000 students with an IEP, we're serving approximately 390 students in-person learning, and 125 of those are at Grove, and then the others are spread across the district. So definitely want to acknowledge the staff who are going in person to serve students currently, understanding the great complexity it presents to them, and sincere appreciation for how they're serving our students during this period. For those who are offering the remote learning, we have adapted to virtual learning for all students. And again, with having children at home, we know that for those educators, it can be a challenge of the dual roles. And so very much appreciate everything that they're doing in terms of managing those challenges, and appreciate our families' understanding. I know that there have been some lessons where children sometimes make a guest appearance or a pet in the household. And so really appreciate everyone's understanding as we do our very best in this unique period. I think that while we're looking forward to moving beyond this time, that people in the system really need to be commended, whether it's ensuring that there's business continuity and people working from home in terms of those pieces, or the direct engagement of students. Very much appreciate everyone's creativity and innovation during this period. We have seen come from it some fantastic practice that I think will continue on even after we leave this pandemic behind us. And I think that this period has flagged for us yet again how important public education is to our community and the need that our staff serve in terms of providing a sense of well-being, stability, and connection to our students. So just want to express appreciation. I did talk previously about the tech deployment, so we will continue to monitor. When we did our deployment on the weekend in terms of one device per family, we do know that we may have some families who no longer needed that device, and so we'll start working through lists then in terms of potentially being able to provide further devices. And we are actively providing Wi-Fi through the MiFi connection to those families who are requesting it. So happy to take any questions from the trustees in terms of the current situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Marsh. We will go to Trustee Barrett for a question.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair Morton. And I would agree with you, Director, that not all heroes wear capes. And I certainly understand quite clearly that those individuals that are still coming in to the classroom to be able to serve, our most vulnerable certainly need to be commended, as well as I know the hours, et cetera, that are being put in to be able to try and pivot. That seems to be the word of the day in order to be able to provide remote learning. There is, however, another piece to this, and I know it's not directed to the board, but perhaps the naivety of an educational system rooted in Queen's Park that suggests that somehow, and I appreciate that daycare, et cetera, and childcare is being a necessity for our teachers, but we also, if I could track all the phone calls that I've had over the last couple of weeks with regards to families that have 3 children at home and full-time roles, and it's almost impossible to be engage all their kids all the time. And I know we're short of Chromebooks. I know you haven't started to make these in your garage yet, Director Marsh, but there is another piece to this. And I think it's a broader perspective. I mean, we have, and I recognize where the strategy is, but we have, let's say JKs and SKs and grade 1s that have given their own technology, but without the Chromebook, you can't raise your hand, you can't necessarily participate in all the pieces, and it's growing, very frustrating for parents at home as well. I know it's not necessarily our total issue, but just to put it on the record, if somebody from the Ministry ever monitors our conversations, that there has to be a broader connotation in order to be able to understand the stressors that are going on in family homes, despite the Herculean efforts of our teachers to be able to close the gap. There are many, many children that are going without education because the home circumstances do not allow it in whatever matter. I know one family that has 4 children in one unit. They're all under grade 5. And so there's 3 kids that are not attending school. And the other technology, it's not our fault. We are doing Herculean efforts, but there's a broader connotation that the ministry has to understand that there has to be more resources and more dollars to being able to close this gap. So just a soapbox. Thank you.
Director Marsh, did you want to respond?
I don't want to respond, but I will say when we speak about the efforts of educators that many of them are also putting together manual packages in those instances to try to engage students, but it's as Trustee Barrett has pointed out, it's certainly not the same as the live engagement.
Thank you. I completely agree. We'll go to Trustee Barnes.
Thank you. And I just wanted to look at our high school, because I know we sort of had to pivot in regards to high school going online. I'm just wondering, how do we have sort of like a feedback of what's happening and how successful that's happening in regards to students that went back online and having to be, I think the cohorts came together and there was a whole piece about that with our high schools going online. So I'm just wondering how that's going, and if we've had enough resource for teachers and stuff to get students going on their classes.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thank you for the question, Trustee Barnes, and thank you because you actually raised an important point that during the remote period, we have now combined cohort A and B because the need for them to be physically apart is not there in the virtual school. I think at secondary, the transition has been very smooth from the point of view that their program was already grounded in a lot of virtual engagement. So every afternoon, students were coming together, cohort and cohort B, for their afternoon class, and that would flip by week. So that it has been a very smooth transition because they've all been engaging already through virtual. It's not to say that there haven't been some unique situations, but the vast majority, it has just been, the mornings have changed in terms of them all being online, which they would have been doing in the afternoon anyway with those classmates. So our program from the very beginning did actually, I think at secondary, lend itself very well in terms of this transition. So all the classrooms were set up, they were used to the platform, and the educators were proficient based on the experience they've had. We know that Quadmester 2 will be coming to an end shortly. And so with Quadmester 3, that will be, of course, depending on timing, we anticipate that we'll be back in school. But if we're not back in school, then it will be about launching Quadmester 3. And that's where there may be the need to make sure that students are getting the appropriate links.
Thank you. Moving to Trustee Edwards.
Yes, just to build on your comment, Director Marsh, on teachers providing sort of hard copy stuff. Although we, as a board and as a province, the whole skills of online learning has been incorporated into many of the lessons. So, and I don't know if this is happening. I just as it has been brought up in other areas where parents receive lesson plans or whatever material, which says go look online and research. So even though the hard copies are there, it doesn't, there's still the ability to go look online, because we've tried to embed learning online in a lot of our lessons, because that's one of the requirements the ministry has talked about, is improving those skills. So it's sort of a reiterative thing. And then the other thing is that with the ongoing pandemic, and particularly this, more people have lost their jobs because those companies that were just hanging on their threads just no longer can do it. And so we do have possibly students that no longer had access, but no longer had access. And so just, are we continually surveying, because this is now our students, to find out if they continue to have access?
Thank you. So Trustee Edwards, the last survey we did was around the new year. In terms of needs. So we're basing our data on that survey. And then we, as I indicated on the weekend when we did the engagement for distribution, we found that some more families had, since the, I can't remember the exact date of the survey, it was over the winter holidays we did it. So it is fairly current, but families also can notify their school administrator if they run into a difficulty that's new post-survey. But we're not going to administer another widespread survey. We're going to go with the New Year's information for now and see where that takes us. But families are always encouraged to reach out to their school administrator should something change for them. We also asked families if they no longer needed the device to return it, so that we could get it to a family that did need it.
Just supplemental question around Wi-Fi devices. I know that there was a shortage on Wi-Fi devices, and I'm wondering if that has improved any. And just wondering if just sort of thinking out of the box, whether it's possible, if we look at whether people had access to internet and no longer could afford it, whether we just supplement that somehow. And I know it would be a difficult thing to do than buying a MiFi device. I don't know.
Thank you for that question, Trustee Edwards, and thank you for your response, Director Marsh. I'm seeing no more comments or questions, so I thank you for that update. Moving on, I don't think we have any presentations coming forward. So I'll go to good news from the system, and I know that everyone is looking forward to hearing some good news. Back to you, Director Marsh.
Thank you. I feel like I'm monopolizing the front part of this meeting, but this is a good news item. And I think that this month's update, it's captured in video as per the normal practice, but I think it really does capture the amazing efforts of our schools in particular and their generous spirit of understanding. You know, we just spoke about the impact of the pandemic in terms of people and the economic hardship that some families are experiencing. And so one of the things highlighted in this month's good news that I think really is about celebrating is how our schools are trying to build connection and community and charity. So it really is a positive video this month. Not that they all aren't, but I wanted to reflect on that particular theme. And I'll now ask for the video to be played, please.
Good evening, everyone. On behalf of DDSB students and staff, we are happy to bring you good news from across the system.
3 Bayview Heights students were selected to receive $200 worth of gifts for showing resiliency, kindness, and personal achievement as part of the annual Durham Region Police Service Cop Shop. Congratulations to Melina, Bailey, and Jonte. With their families, Chief of Police Todd Roller and Director Marsh in attendance, students were presented with gifts from DRPS and Pickering Town Center staff.
Elementary students in the DDSB at Home program start the day with a 30-minute interactive broadcast called Campus Connect. Over 2,000 students in kindergarten to grade 8 tune in before their online classes to talk about character traits, get moving with physical exercises, and brainstorming activities.
The Durham Black Educators Network launched a pilot tutoring program to support students who self-identify as Black, as they noticed the transition to remote learning was not as easy for some students. So far, they received great reviews and hope to continue the program in the 2021 to 2022 school year.
DDSB joined with the Canadian Centre for Substance Use and Addiction, Lakeridge Health, and Ontario Addiction Treatment Centres to host a question and answer webinar on drug and substance use awareness with expert panelists. Students across the Durham region and other school boards attended to make it a great success.
Ahead of the winter break, DDSB schools across Durham region organized various holiday giving drives to support their communities. Here are a few highlights. With food security top of mind for many of our families in Durham, the Make a Difference Poverty team launched the Giving Pantry. Community members were invited to fundraise or food raise during the holiday season and beyond. Our teams worked in partnership with school administrators and school social workers to get winter break food baskets out to families. As our schools are part of the community, we are excited to have them help to support children, youth, and families.
Ajax High School and Roland Michener Public School collected 1,250 pounds of food and $1,000 for Feed the Need Durham, for a total donation worth $7,000. Their donation helped to feed approximately 1,000 Durham residents facing food insecurity.
Students at multiple schools came together to make the holiday season a little brighter for seniors in our community. Students at Michael Jean Public School created 660 handmade holiday cards for residents at local retirement communities. Residents of Fairview Lodge, Hillsdale Estates, and Hillsdale Terraces were overjoyed to receive the beautifully designed cards.
With help from over 200 volunteers, Pine Ridge Secondary School graduate Noor Syed and current grade 12 DDSB at Home student Keelan Eastveld created 1,804 unique handmade cards addressed to residents of Whitby's Fairview Lodge, Taunton Mills, and Winbourne Park in Ajax. Great effort, everyone!
DDSB's Waverly Public School has accepted the challenge to fundraise and build the school's first ever playground. All grades will enjoy this awesome fitness place playground. The school has received a $2,000 grant from At Your Best, in addition to community donations. Good luck with the fundraising, Waverly. We can't wait to see it completed.
We would like to recognize Uxbridge Public School teacher Cindy Rainville on her acceptance into the Welland Sports Wall of Fame. She was a standout soccer star at the University of South Alabama and is one of the many talented teachers at DDSB who has transitioned athletic success into a master's degree in education. Congratulations on your Wall of Fame induction, Ms. Rainville.
The DDSB mental health team, made up of the psychological services and social work departments, recently released a joint video to support school communities. It was created to provide students with a visual connection to their school mental health team. The video explains who they are and how students can access supports.
As students, we are excited to be a part of DDSB's Ignite Learning Culture and celebrating the excellence of the system.
As you can see, the dates of significance take us to the end of February.
Thank you, Olivia and Lauren from DDSB at Home Secondary for reading this month's good news.
So Chair, that is this month's report. It did reference the Campus Connect. I had the opportunity to be on the last Campus Connect radio show of 2020. And I have to say that I think that our administrators are turning into DJs. They were very professional during Campus Connect, and it was certainly a pleasure to be there to engage with the students.
I think we really need to applaud all the good things that are happening. We're all facing many challenges, but we are grateful for all the good things that we are seeing with our students and our staff and our entire school communities. So thank you for that good news. Moving on, I'm looking for the report from the Committee of the Whole in camera. So I'm going to go to Trustee Thatcher for that.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. The board approved the actions of the Committee of the Whole in camera and discussed the disclosure of intimate personal or financial information in respect of a member of the board or committee, an employee or prospective employee of the board, or a pupil or his or her parent or guardian, and administrative transfers and placement. Chair Morton, this is my report.
Thank you, Trustee Thatcher. Would you like to put forward a motion to receive this report?
Yes, thank you.
And could I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Trustee Templeton. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you kindly. Now we're moving on to recommended actions, and we do have a number. The first one is the report from Standing Committee, January the 4th, and I'm also going to go back to Trustee Thatcher for that.
Thank you, Chair Morton. My report can be found on pages 30 to 36. A resolution was passed by the Standing Committee on January 4th, 2021 in closed session on matters involving the disclosure of intimate personal or financial information in respect of a member of the board or committee, an employee or prospective employee of the board, or a pupil or his, her, or her parent or guardian. I move that the board now receive the minutes and approve the actions of the January 4, 2021 Standing Committee, including during closed session, and adopt the resolution that was passed.
Thank you for putting forth that motion. Could I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Trustee Barnes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. Moving on. I'm looking for the report from SEAC, so I will go to Trustee Donna Edwards.
Thank you. As part of the December 17th SEAC meeting, members held their election. Eva Kyriakides was acclaimed and continues on as chair, and I was declared vice chair of SEAC. Minutes of that meeting will be brought forward to the board once approved by SEAC. The minutes of November 19th SEAC meeting can be found starting on pages 37 in the board package. SEAC has redesigned the meeting schedule to allow for more more time for discussing and addressing community concerns. And one of the examples was a very extensive discussion around the use of clear masks and the impact on the various learning disabilities. Staff are planning to release a survey to parents which will be used for planning the second half of the school year, as well as the next school year. The focus on those questions is what is working well, what has not worked well, and what is something that we'd like to consider in our planning. And that is my report.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Would you like to move the receipt of that report?
Sorry. Sure.
Thank you. Seconded by Trustee Thatcher. All those in favor? Thank you. Moving on, we have an incident ad hoc committee report, also coming from Trustee Edwards.
The report from the Incident Ad Hoc Committee can be found starting on the board package on page 49 right through to 146. The report includes Appendixes A and B, a revised staff report on the committee works, and the minutes from November 25th and February 29th meetings of 2020, respectively. Section 4 of Appendix A outlines the outcomes of the committee, such as an example is the biannual reporting to the board of summaries of incident reporting, the supports that have been put in place in response to emergent issues. And the monthly summaries of the data is reviewed by senior team to discuss, consider solutions and supports that are required to address incident issues. The minutes of February 19th include, which is also Appendix B, includes many of the processes, supports, and services that have been developed or revised to address concerns first brought to the committee around incidences that were reported. The committee itself has determined its mandate and makes a final recommendation that through the director, staff maintain the practice of providing the board with meaningful reports of incidents that allow effective and appropriate oversight in our policy development. And that's my report.
Thank you. I will go to Trustee Lundquist. I see her hand is up. Trustee Lundquist.
Trying, sorry. So I have, I think, a question and then just an observation. So I understood that this report was coming before us and there would be a and the recommendation is that the committee has essentially fulfilled its purpose and we kind of move along. And I agree that that has happened. But I did want to make an observation that has me worried. So I read the report a number of times because I recognize our role as policy and strictly policy and governance, and that we do not appropriately have a role in operations. But I also recognize that we have a constituent base who is concerned about violent incidents. And that includes not just staff, but parents of children that are in the system as well. So I read the report, and this is where my worry lies. As I read the report, it seems to me that we are making very significant efforts to minimize what is actually occurring. And the thing that worries me about that is that it's not unique to our board, right? This is a concern that we have in education across the province. And I don't want to detract from some of the really incredible efforts that have been made by this board on this front, including some of the tools that have been employed to address bias in handing out discipline and that kind of thing. So I think a lot of good work has been done, but I do worry that like as I read it, I'm going to provide an example or two. You go through the charts and it looks like all of the arrows are pointing downwards as though there are downward trends, and then there are suggestions of why those trends are going downwards, and there are other equally plausible suggestions that are not addressed. And that I don't really understand why that is. So that's one of the things, but the other thing is that I don't think that violent incidents are going down. And when you look at those charts, these like beautiful graphics, that's what the suggestion is, that's what the tone is, and I'm not sure that that's accurate. So I worry about the way these things get reported, and I don't think that is a unique problem with our board. I understand the complexity of this. I understand what a challenging situation educators are in, that staff are in, and I recognize that there has to be a bigger systemic solution to some of the challenges, including appropriately supporting kids who need more supports. But it's interesting to me to look at a report when it talks about human rights, but it doesn't actually talk about all of the people, you know, that may be impacted. So I agree with so much that's in here in terms of the process and individualization and the need for that. But I also recognize that I get a lot of calls from parents whose children are traumatized by some of what is happening to them, and that trauma and violence has an impact long term. And I think that at some point we have to address that in a report of some kind. And if it's not through an incident ad hoc committee, it has to come another way. So that is my concern with the report. I do think that the terms of this committee are spent, and I would certainly vote in that direction. But I am worried that this somehow takes a back burner when it's so vitally important to classrooms every single day. So I felt the need to say those things because as I read the report, I wasn't confident that it actually reflected the realities of what people are experiencing in our classrooms, at least not from some of the realities that I hear that I don't see reflected there. Thank you.
Thank you. I see that Trustee Crawford has his hand up, so we would go to Trustee Paul Crawford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to follow up on Trustee Lindquist's concerns, and most of our reports are like this. They have much volume and little detail on what the actual problem has been. And I just wanted to ask that this started with the government. The government told all boards that they had to report all incidents of violence that were taking place. And they started that back a few years ago. So I'm assuming that the government is still asking for violent incident reports.
Is there somebody who would like to answer that question?
Nothing has changed in terms of the government's requests.
And the details that they ask for in those reports are a lot more revealing than we would discuss in public. And I want everyone to know how much effort has gone into this. And we are, in a sense, describing it, but we seem to be always talking about what the real problem is violence. In fact, we changed the name of our committee so that it's called Incident Reports. And that in itself is probably not the proper thing to do. So one of the things that we talked about that would probably be revealing would be what the costs are to us related to injuries, injuries to staff, injuries to students, and even injuries to the students that might be perpetuating the violence. And I think that's the kind of detail that people are looking for. I don't mean personal details, because obviously there's no value to giving names or anything like that. But we should know how many suspensions are due to violence, if there are police reports or police involvement in violence, and the injuries, and also the cost. And as I've mentioned before, what we are doing might be the best thing that you can do with the situation, but it doesn't go along with our policies of safety being priority one and tolerance not being accepted. I think we need more detail, and maybe the committee could do that and actually change our policies to reflect what we're actually doing. Again, like some other trustees, I'm very concerned with some of the reports I get, some of the individual reports. I just hope that that's just what they are, just few in nature, but I know that they're not. And just for instance, how many violent incidents have there been this year? Is that part of the report? And if it is, could we have it reported separately?
Thank you for those comments. I'm going to go to Director Marsh. Would you like to respond?
In terms of current situations, I'm actually going to turn it over to the two superintendents who provided the report at standing in terms of positive school climate and the most recent data that they included in that report 2 weeks ago. So I'm not sure which superintendent would like to lead the way in terms of responding.
I can begin. So sorry, just pulling up the report. So in terms of specific numbers, we are monitoring quite closely. We know year to date 2021, we've had a dozen reports, and we will be compiling a report for September through to the end of January to bring forward with the mid-year operational goal update next month.
Thank you for those comments. Thank you for the questions. I find this amazing that this ad hoc committee was formed more than 3 years ago. So November the 20th, 2017, we actually began that ad hoc committee, and we've been working since that time. I think we all agree on many things. Firstly, the well-being of our students and our staff is a core priority of the Durham District School Board. It is our shared responsibility to keep everyone, staff and students, healthy and safe. This is a recommended action, so I'm going to go back to Trustee Edwards and looking at the conclusion of your report. Do you want to put forward a motion?
Yes, I will. I just want to comment on the policy program, the PPM 120, which deals with violence in schools, and in that respect is that it specifically talks about school boards reporting on violent incidences, what are considered basically around possession of a weapon, firearm, physical assault, sexual assault, robbery, use of a weapon, extortion, and then hate and bias motivated. And our reporting, we as trustees decided in this committee wanted to see a little bit more. And that's why we changed it from violence to incident reporting. And we report on so much more, and we get so much more data because it's a combination of this reporting that is required by the ministry, the health and safety reporting, etc. So we report on so much more, and the data is there. I agree with some of the comments Trustee Lindquist said, but I do agree that the term and that this committee has fulfilled its mandate. And so I do move that through the director, staff maintain the practice of providing the board with meaningful reports of incidents that allow for effective oversight and or policy development. Because it really is through that data that we have to be able to do. I know that I have some concerns about more around accountability and ensuring that the things that we have put in place and the policies are reflecting that. And there's something else that I've been working on eventually that was thinking of a motion for something further, but at this point in time, that's the motion I put forward.
Thank you, Trustee Edwards. Trustee Stone, are you putting your hand up to second that motion, or do you have a question?
Oh, I can second the motion.
Thank you. And do you also have a question?
I also have a comment on the motion. I just wondered whether or not we needed to add a time for the reports, and are we thinking of 2 reports a year, or does this need to be a little more specific?
Trustee Edwards.
We've already passed a motion about in the past for biannual reports on the statistics from as around incident reporting, so that I see that as part of the whole policy is concerned.
So we have a motion on the floor from Trustee Edwards, seconded by Trustee Stone. Any further comments or questions? We will have a vote. All those in favor? Any opposed? Thank you kindly. The motion is carried. Moving on to the next recommended action, and that is the retainer of an integrity commissioner. And for that, I would go to Trustee Scott Templeton.
Thank you, Chair Morton. Before I start, I'd just like to thank the committee, which consisted of Chair Morton, Trustee Edwards, Trustee Brainy, and Trustee Forbes. The committee was established pursuant to the provisions of Section 2.1 of Bylaw Number 12, Trustee Code of Conduct. The purpose of this report is to provide the board with the committee's recommendations as to the appointment of a new integrity commissioner. The Durham District School Board invited proposals from lawyers, law firms, mediators, workplace investigators, and others with the necessary skills and qualifications for the provision of the services as integrity commissioner under the board's bylaw number 12, Trustee Code of Conduct. The committee granted top scoring bidders with an opportunity to move to the interview phase. Those interviews are now complete with the committee, and the committee has determined that the highest scoring bidder is ADR Chambers Inc. The individual working with ADR individuals who will be the primary contact for the board is Mr. Michael Maynard. There is a recommendation. The committee recommends that the board appoint ADR Chambers Inc. as the integrity commissioner under bylaw number 12, Trustee Code of Conduct, subject to the appropriate terms and conditions being agreed upon between ADR Chambers Inc. and the Durham District School Board. And I would put forward the motion on that.
Thank you, Trustee Templeton. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Barnes, questions or comments? Trustee Paul Crawford.
Yes, could we get an idea of the financial implications, the approximate cost of this?
I direct that question to Councillor Patrick Cotter.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton, the financial package regarding the retainer is part of the RFP proposal and was submitted to the board in confidence. And so I'm not able to answer that question at this time.
Thank you. Are there any other further comments or questions? Then I'm going back to that recommendation, and I will repeat that recommendation. The committee recommends that the board appoint ADR Chambers Incorporated as the integrity commissioner under bylaw number 12, Trustee Code of Conduct. subject to appropriate terms and conditions being agreed upon between ADR Chambers Incorporated and the DDSB. That was moved by trustee Templeton, seconded by trustee Barnes. I'm now calling for the vote. All of
Madam
those.
Chair?
Yes.
Can we
Yes,
speak to the
trustee
motion?
Crawford. I
Can we
beg your
speak to the
pardon?
motion? Can we speak to the motion?
You've already had an opportunity to speak to the motion. Do you have any further
Well, no,
comments?
I asked a question.
Okay, then.
Well,
speak to
you
the
know what,
motion.
Madam Chair, never mind. I'll just ask for a recorded vote.
We have been asked to have a recorded vote. We will call for that recorded vote at the present time. I'm not doing this in any particular order.
Chair Morton, would you prefer perhaps if the if Coordinator Fitzpatrick assisted with it?
I would absolutely appreciate if she would do that. I would greatly appreciate that. Thank you for considering it.
Thank you. Is that okay to go ahead and do the roll call, please?
Yes, that's fine. Trustee Barnes,
Agree to the motion.
Trustee Barrett,
Opposed.
and Trustee Brainy is not here tonight.
No, I'm here.
Oh, Trustee Brainy?
I've been here all night.
Oh,
I agree.
okay. Trustee Crawford,
Opposed?
Trustee Edwards,
I agree.
Trustee Forbes,
I agree.
Trustee Lindquist, Trustee Lindquist.
She may have signed off.
Okay. Chair Morton,
I agree.
Trustee Stone,
Agreed.
Trustee Templeton,
Agreed.
Trustee Thatcher,
Opposed?
okay. We have 7 in
Point of order,
agreement.
Madam Chair, just, it should be announced that a 2/3 vote is required for this. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Sorry.
Is that correct that we need a 2/3 motion? Point of
Yes.
order, Madam Chair? I'm just-
Certainly, let's inquire from
Yes.
from Mr. Cotter. Do we need a 2/3 vote?
Just let me double check the terms of the bylaw. Give me 1 minute.
I'd like to double check if trustee Lundquist is here or if she has departed.
I
May I-
don't see her signed in as a participant, Madam Chair, so.
Thank you.
Appendix 1 of the DDSB Code of Conduct does provide that the integrity commissioner is to be appointed on a 2/3 majority vote.
Thank you for that. I'm looking at, and I see that 7 people were in favor. 3 people were opposed. Out of the 10 people who voted, To me, if my mathematical skills are where they need to be, I'm at 63%, which is short of the 2/3 majority. Is there anyone who would like to confirm that or tell me that I'm wrong?
Madam Chair, there should be twice as much vote. That's close. And anything that's over the amount, even if it's 0.1, would be counted.
Madam Chair?
Certainly, yes.
I recognize that according to what Council Cotter has brought forward, it is not my desire. I have my own reasons for why I cast my negative vote, but I also do not want to stand in the way of the board on moving forward where there's an obvious majority and wanting to be able to go forward with this appointment. I have my own reasons. I'll just leave it there, but I will reverse my vote to be able to vote in favor of the motion because I do recognize that there is a majority of individuals here that want this to go forward, and I accede to that desire. I have no desire to be able to hold up something that the board is looking to move forward with, so I will change my recorded votes.
Thank you. So the final recorded vote would be 8 people voting in favor of this recommendation, 2 voting to oppose it. That exceeds the 2/3 majority required. That motion is passed. Thank you. Moving on to the next recommended action, and that is the Director's Performance Appraisal Committee, and I will speak to that. Under the Director Performance Review Committee policy, a committee is to be established to, amongst other things, oversee the selection of the external consultant and to work with the consultant and the Director of Education to prepare the Director of Education position profile and objectives document. Our policy provides as follows. This Board of Trustees shall establish a Director of Education Performance Review Committee. The terms of reference will be, in consultation with the Director of Education, oversee the selection of the external consultant that will be retained by the board and any additional consultant that may be retained as referenced in paragraph 4.1.2. Work with the external consultant to implement the Director of Education's performance review in accordance with this policy and to carry out any other activities specified in this policy. And thirdly, to work with the external consultant to develop and implement the self-assessment performance evaluation tool for the Director of Education. So I am looking for a motion to establish this committee with the terms of reference as outlined. But I do want to note that under the policy, all trustees are eligible to sit on the committee, but there shall be a minimum of 3 trustees plus the chair and the vice chair of the board. So assuming the motion carries, I will be looking for volunteers to sit on that committee with us. Thank you. So I'm looking for somebody who would put forward that motion to create the committee. And I see Trustee Thatcher's hand, so she will put forward the motion. Do I have somebody second it? Thank you, Trustee Barrett. Questions or comments? Trustee Barnes?
Are we going to have an email going out asking who is sitting on the committee or is interested? What's the process after this?
Well, once the committee is formed, you can either let me know that you want to serve on that committee, and I can certainly email all trustees asking for people who are interested in serving. We will certainly be reaching out to everyone, but I also invite you to let me know your thoughts. Other comments, other questions? Seeing none, we have a motion on the table. It has been seconded. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Moving on to the next. So we have so many exciting things happening tonight. The next on our agenda is the unnamed North Ajax French Immersion Public School boundary. And I'm going to ask Superintendents Mohammed Hamid and Margaret Lazarus to address that.
Thank you. Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. The package can be found on page 148 of the package that you received. The purpose of this report is to seek trustee approval for the unnamed North Ajax French Immersion Public School boundary effective September 2021. The information required is provided for trustees, information and decision within the report. As well, Carrie Trombino is here from the Planning Department to provide any additional information required at the trustees' request. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Are there any comments? I'm going to Trustee Edwards.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, but I had also asked that staff actually have the ability to show us the boundary of the particular area of the new named school of option B, which is one of the recommendations with Cataraqui. And the reason for
Could you repeat that question again, Donna, please?
I had actually asked staff to help trustees visualize option B was bringing up the proposed boundary under option B with this basically having a boundary of the current Cataraqui boundary and then superimpose the boundary for the new unnamed school. And I don't know if they managed to do that. But there is, and if they haven't, then I'll just try to describe that particular area and then ask some questions from the report.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. As per my recollection, trustees, and I do apologize, the information that I had was that you were looking for the enrollment numbers and to have planning ready with the enrollment numbers so that you could have those numbers to discuss the enrollment, particularly of the southern schools. That being said, we can work to provide you with some of those other additional pieces. If that was this.
I don't need it now. It was for to show that I had sent a separate request, and I guess through an email. Anyways, basically, there in option B there is a portion of the existing Cataraqui boundary that is basically north of Highway 2, west of Salem, that that is going about 100, contains about 100 families in that particular area. And what my one question is that we did receive responses. My understanding is that we received 15 responses, but how many of those 15 can we attribute to those actual 100 families?
I'm going to pass to Carrie Trombino to provide that information.
Thank you. In regards to the email and voicemails we received, we also received some responses in regard to the thought exchange. I believe the majority of them could be not identified or directly identified back to the Cataraqui public school students included within the area that you outlined in option B.
Okay. All right, the subsequent question is that we did receive a letter that's included in the package from the SEC from Cataraqui. However, again, which basically said they prefer option A. But again, I would like to know how many of the SEC members do we have any idea through regular attendance, whatever, if they actually came from the families, the 100 families that would be affected by option B?
Carrie, do we have that information at the ready?
Sorry, my understanding from the principal was that 1 or 2, I believe it was, SEC members resided within that boundary area outlined on the option B.
And then just around French immersion, especially when it comes to feeder schools, currently Cataraqui is a feeder school. Well, for both, Cataraqui is a dual program. And it has a feeder school for Pickering High School and Ajax High School, but I also know it's a feeder school for Dennis O'Connor, depending on the area. A lot of if you look at the numbers, the graduates go to Dennis O'Connor because it's a walking school within walking distance. And so that portion, just to confirm, that portion of 100 families, that is a group that is a feeder school to for French immersion or is it both French immersion and English to Pickering High School?
Go ahead, Carrie.
Sorry, can you just repeat that question? It was it that
is those 100 families feeders, whether it's French or English, are they both feed to Pickering High School?
I believe it's just over 100 students, not 100 families, and they do feed to Pickering High School for French immersion. At least a portion of them do, not all of them. The boundary is divided between Ajax High School and Cataraqui for French immersion.
So just to clarify, a portion of that 100 students that we're identifying to move over, even not all of those would be FI, go to Pickering High School for FI.
That's correct.
Okay. So, all right, I would like to make comments afterwards, but I just want to ask if any of I've got a lot of questions, but at the end, before we go for the recommendations, I would like to make some comments.
Could you repeat that, please, Trustee Edwards?
I've monopolized a lot of the questions at this point in time. I want other trustees to ask questions, and then I would like to, when it comes to recommendations in the motion, I would like to make some comments.
Thank you. I will go. I see Christine Nanscoville has come in. Christine, welcome. Are there comments that you would like to make?
Hi, thank you. Not at this time.
Feel free if you ever feel the need. I will go to Trustee Barnes.
Thank you very much. I wanted to thank staff for the work that have been done on this, establishing the boundaries for these. I have a couple of concerns in regards to the option B option that was put forward. One, I'm concerned that of the engagement. I mean, we've done staff has done a great job getting this information out to the community and getting it done. I'm concerned about the amount of feedback that we got in regards to the schools, considering the amount of families it's going to affect. The other piece I have concern around is that we are in the middle of our French language review, and I worry that if we move students, we might have to move them again after we finish our FSL review. The other concern I have is the South Ajax, moving students from South Ajax. South Ajax is not growing. We're experiencing decline in most of our schools in the South. And I worry about actually taking students from Cataraqui to put into a North school, whereas the North is still having new construction and building. So I'm just wondering, staff could sort of share some of the thoughts in regards to those concerns.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. In our conversations, and I'll pass it to Carrie shortly, but in our conversations in looking at the decision making, we did determine that there was approximately, as has been mentioned, about 100 students from the Cataraqui area that would be slated to move to the new school. The new school is a capacity of 550 students. And you are correct, Trustee Barnes, in that there is a construction that is happening north of Rossland within that area currently. I will pass it to either Carrie or Christine if they had any additional information they wanted to share with regards to the request from Trustee Barnes. Anything to add, Carrie?
Sorry, I was just going to add further to Trustee Barnes' comment. Cataraqui Public School does have a fairly stable boundary with its enrollment, and in that area of Ajax, there is, other than possibly some infill of higher density development, as is across most of our mature neighborhoods, there is not the development potential in the Cataraqui boundary as there is in North Ajax, where we see and still have lands designated for future development.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Patrice?
Yeah, it does. It confirms what my concerns were in regards to moving students out of that Cataraqui catchment area. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We will go to Trustee Crawford, who has his hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering, because this is a boundary issue, and when we discussed it recently, what came up was that we were also dealing with the review of the French language. Is this a recommendation that has to be dealt with prior to that review coming forward? Is this a timing issue?
Let's go to Director Marsh.
Thank you, through you, Chair Morton. We have intentionally, with the French immersion review, delayed implementation so that no students would have to transition on multiple accounts, understanding that the pandemic delayed the French immersion, the French second language review. So we cannot wait until the French second language review comes forward to board in terms of the decisions you need to make there. Also understanding that those decisions are of a bigger scope and that the board did request further time in terms of that report. So wanting to be very respectful of the significance of that report, but this is a decision we do need to move forward with in terms of getting this school ready to go.
Thank you for that.
Trustee Barnes.
Thank you, Director Marsh and staff, for adding to that. I think my thoughts would be, and I would support option A in regards to putting forward just splitting the population from Michael Jean with the new school. And after the French language review, we see what changes need to be made for other schools. I think it's important, especially in Ajax, to balance out the north and south, as we don't really have that right now. And I wondered with staff, what would be the major implications from that if we just sort of split McKellar for now with option A and review again, maybe do a full Ajax boundary review in after the French immersion review.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I will ask Christine to comment on that. Christine.
Thank you. And through you, Chair. Trustee Barnes, the implications would be that we would still have portables on site and need those portables at Cataraqui, assuming that everyone was back in person learning for next school year. So it would also involve doing another consultation with these families. But like you have mentioned, a full Town of Ajax French immersion review would be more appropriate for the balancing of the French immersion population throughout Ajax.
Thank you very much.
And back to Trustee Edwards. Before we go for a motion, you had some further questions.
Just to add to Trustee Barnes' comments, and that again, when it comes to developments around Ajax and a French immersion, eventually a boundary view, is that Ajax is surrounded by Pickering to the west and to the north, and Whitby to the east. Residential growth is limited in Ajax. There's not a lot of land left. And with Duffins Creek on the west and Crothers Creek on the east, when it comes to protected lands. And then north of Concession 5 is within the city of Pickering boundary. And also it's important to note it's Maple Ridge's boundary, which is also an area that we've had come forward, and one of the reasons why we moved ahead with the FSL review. So I know that Patrice said that she would like to put forward. I don't know if that was actually a motion, but definitely would like to move with the motion of option A, with just affecting McKellar as the boundary choice at this point in time, recognizing that there might be a full FI review, not only with Ajax, but it might also affect Pickering, because Maple Ridge is the north of Ajax, and that's where all the development is happening.
Trustee Stone.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, I just have a few questions. I feel like I've come in the back end of this because I'm fairly new to the board now, but so please indulge me if these questions have been asked before, I don't know. But how long would the bus ride be for Cataraqui students to the new French immersion school? Would it vary because we don't know, they all live in different areas?
If I could, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. I mean, we do have Kelly Machulin with us this evening for another report, but like any time, without knowing where students are coming from exactly year over year, there's always changes to routes, and ride times can change. Just because you may live door to door, only a 10-minute drive from a school, doesn't mean that you're going to have a short bus ride. Through annual reviews of routes, there can be differing times.
And did you say that the population in Cataraqui was static, or is FI growing there and the non-FI declining?
Christine or Carrie?
The total enrollment currently for Cataraqui Public School is 667 students. So that school has a capacity of 121 students with 3 portables on site. As far as future enrollment, sorry if you just bear with me as I scroll through. Cataraqui Public School has a fairly stable boundary. The regular program enrollment is slightly declining, whereas the French immersion enrollment is increasing.
So was there thought about bringing FI students to Cataraqui from Michael Jean, considering the non-FI is in decline?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The boundaries for Michael John is far to the north of Cataraqui. It's a vast area with a very large area slated for development. And planning can correct me if I'm wrong, but that would create an additional bus ride that would be in excess of a certain amount of minutes. In addition, there would also be, and I'm not sure about the capacity of Cataraqui, but with the volume of construction, that there may be a overcapacity situation at Cataraqui were that to happen.
Okay, just one more question. The students that go from Ajax to Pickering, I think they go to Sir John A. Macdonald. Is that correct? They go for the French immersion there?
Some do, yes, that would be correct.
How long is the bus ride for those students?
Carrie, do you have that figure?
I don't have that information. I know when there was a parent who commented through the consultation process that indicated that it was at least 40 minutes, but I don't know if that information is correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm looking at the recommendation on page 164, and the recommendation states this: that the Durham District School Board approve option B as the boundary for the unnamed North Ajax French Immersion Public School located at 270 Williamson Drive West, effective September 2021. I was going to ask one of the Ajax trustees to put forward that motion, but they have both spoken in favor of option A. So I'm asking you for advice. Where do we go with this?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Trustee Crawford?
It has to go through that way, but it could be amended as soon as it's on the floor by replacing B with A. And of course, if that amendment goes through, then it's probably a pretty good indication that A is the one that's accepted. We can't do much with it except to vote the recommendation down and then start all over again. But I think it would be much easier to amend it.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I love Paul Crawford, but I might respectfully disagree, because I would think, wouldn't you think, Trustee Crawford, that if the motion is option B and there's amendment to A, don't you think that would substantially change the direction of the motion as an amendment? Because it would literally change the options. Is there a need? And I'm just saying that there is a recommendation by staff. Would the Ajax trustees not be able to put a motion forward that they recommend option A as outlined and not necessarily put option B on the table? Trustee Crawford, just
well,
dialogue.
No, and I understand what you're saying, and you're saying that the wording following that is such that the wording would have to be changed also because the recommendation goes into detail. Because if they're saying A, then the details of A are part of the report, or I'm sorry, B is part of the report. And if the trustees want A, wouldn't that be part of the report also? So I'm not sure of the detail that follows it, but I think the easiest way would be to amend it rather than vote it down and then start again. But I'm open to it. I'm just trying to save some time.
I'm going to go to Director Marsh.
Thanks. So in the report, staff do make a recommendation, but that recommendation is not on the floor yet as a motion. And so it's well within the trustees' realm to ignore staff's recommendation and create their own motion. So this one is not yet. I don't believe anyone moved it on the table unless I missed that.
No, it has not been moved. Trustee Edwards?
Actually, when I spoke, I said that I wasn't sure that Trustee Barnes did, but I said, but I would move that option B, option A be put on to as recommended staff. And the report just died, and I can't pull up the full option B description. Option A description. So staff is going to have to help me with that. But I had said that, and I did say that I would put that motion forward.
So Trustee Edwards, are you saying that presently you are going to put forward the motion that we would accept option A?
With a description of option A from the report, I cannot, as I said, it died. I can't, it's downloading and it's not, so I don't have the full description in front of me.
But before then you could put forward that motion, you need to have those details. Could I go to Superintendent Hamid to provide her with those?
Point of order, Madam Chair, is really the descriptors necessary in the motion because they are outlined in the report. And I think that the motion, as Trustee Edwards put forward, is being able to move forward with option A as described in the report, I think should suffice without necessarily having all the details. Just trying to move things forward as well. So.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding here. So Trustee Edwards has put forward a motion that the Durham District School Board approve option A as the boundary for the unnamed North Ajax French Immersion Public School located at 270 Williamson Drive West, effective September 2021. Do we have a seconder for that motion? Trustee Barnes. Further comments, questions? Trustee Barnes.
Thank you. I just think this is an opportunity. So we don't often say opportunity with COVID, but now that a lot of our students are online, we sort of have the opportunity to really look at this issue in Ajax that is kind of built in for the last couple of years in regards to balance in our schools. So I thank you for putting that on the table, Trustee Edwards.
Okay. So we have a motion in front of us to go with option A, put forward by Trustee Edwards, seconded by Trustee Barnes. If you could please indicate under the participants the hands so that we can clearly see who is voting for that motion.
I'm sorry, Carolyn, Trustee Morton, I don't have that option to put a check mark up, but I would vote yes.
Okay.
Chair, are you saying to use the hand rather than the yes?
I think Trustee Crawford, we should use the yes, not the hand.
The yes with the green check mark would work.
Got it. Thank you.
Scott Templeton, do you mean the green check mark? Okay. Motion has passed. Are there any opposed? Seeing none, that motion is carried. Thank you. Before we go any further, it has been brought to my attention that we made an error earlier dealing with the retainer of the Integrity Commissioner. If you will recall, we had a vote, but it is brought to my attention that when we vote like that, we cannot change the vote after the fact. So I was saying that it was 7 out of 11, but really there were only 10 people voting. So we still have to go with those 3 people who opposed that vote, 7 people who were in favor. So that is 7 out of 10 were in favor. That is a 2/3 majority. So we are still going with the hiring of that Integrity Commissioner, and we do have a 2/3 majority. Thank you. Moving on, we have another boundary question. This time we're moving to Whitby. So I am asking Superintendents Davis and Lazarus to address this one.
Thank you, Chair Norton, and through you. The report can be found on pages 228 to 310 of your agenda package. The purpose of this report is to seek trustee approval for the unnamed North Whitby Public School boundaries effective September 2021. All information is compiled and presented in the report this evening, and I would like to welcome Carrie Trombino, Manager of Planning, and Christine Nestville, Chief Facilitators Officer, to support with any questions that you may have for us.
Trustee Barrett, do you have a question?
Not a question, but more of a comment. As with the last one, taking the lead off from the local trustees that understand the community better than I. The only thing that I would say is that looking forward to some more robust growth in this area, and I recognize that we approved this school. I think the first business case was 2017. I think it was brought forward in 2018. The numbers concern me with the lack of enrollment at the schools. I know we're not going back, and we're certainly going forward with the building of the school. I can see Christine Nanskaville smirking at me on the thing, quite rightfully so. But whether it's Christine or Carrie Trombino, somebody reassure me that this isn't going to be a Donald A. Wilson that took us almost a decade to fill it. So can you give me some sort of assurance? Because I'm sitting in Oshawa with this high school that is full. It's going to remain full. And yet I got 4 schools in Whitby that are going to be 60 to 70% at capacity. So can you give me some assurances that we're going to fill these schools up?
I can answer that question. In regards to the new school, unnamed North Whitby Public School, included within the boundary just to the north of Conlin Road, there are future 2,000 units identified within those lands. So we will get to the point where a portion of the boundary will have to be redirected to another holding school because it won't be able to take the students that are, all of the students that are outlined in that boundary area. So the lands north of Conlon Road included within the boundary are included as part of the Brooklyn secondary expansion plan. So Brooklyn growth will be dipping south of the 407. We do have a future school site in those lands. So at some point, we do have that potential for another school site just south of the 407, north of Conlon Road. But in the meantime, that growth or a portion of it will be designated to the new school. And since we only include registered plans within numbers, that's why those students aren't currently shown. I don't expect, we're only starting to see those plans now, from a very preliminary stage. So it could be a couple years or so before we do see students out of that area. Similar, Dr. Robert Thornton could be used as another holding school for some of those lands. And in regards to Robert Munch Public School, West Whitby still has quite a bit of growth on the north side of Taunton. And some of that, even though directly west of Robert Munch, we have some a holding area designated to Ormiston Public School, but there is further development further west, and we would expect that those students would attend Robert Munch Public School. And if you've been by that area, you can see how quickly it's grown. So I would expect to see that growth within the next couple of years, but it's only at the point of once a plan is registered and the builder is ready to construct development that we start showing those actual numbers in the enrollment. But from the planning department, we do expect that those schools will all be beyond capacity, unfortunately, once again, at some point.
Okay, thank you for that. But I jokingly said the last meeting that I was going to ask for an FOI to understand how the ministry makes their decisions. So it's quite interesting that in Whitby, we build schools in anticipation of growth. And in Oshawa, we're waiting for be able to recognize the growth that already has taken place. I don't object to, Trustee Thatcher, Trustee Lundquist, or the schools in Brooklyn, but it does, I have to scratch my head, because these schools are going to be 60 or 70%. I've already got a high school that's already maxed out and can't get it approved. But anyway, I'm going to take the lead on the boundaries from the Whitby trustees who know much better than I, but I couldn't pass up the opportunity. So I thank you, Carrie, for your explanation. But it is funny. Oshawa has to have the growth. In Whitby, we anticipate it. So, and I know it's not your decision. So I hold nobody responsible but Queen's Park. Thank you.
Thank you. We will go to Trustee Stone.
Thank you. Don't want to belabor this comment, but I too was really surprised at the numbers for the utilization. I couldn't believe it. So I'm hoping we do fill up those schools, just like Michael was saying. And Carrie, were you saying that the 2,000 units, within the 2,000 units, those won't be ready for another couple of years? Is that what you're saying? How far out we're talking?
I would say at least 2 years.
At least 2 years, maybe.
Yeah.
Longer.
That land is, we're currently receiving, starting to receive plans for that.
Okay.
So yeah, I would say at least 2 years.
Okay, thank you.
I will go to Whitby trustees, and firstly, Trustee Thatcher, would you like to speak to this?
Yes, thank you. And through you, Chair Morton. I'd like to first start by thanking all involved for this very comprehensive report. I recognize that this whole thing started in 2017, and I wasn't around. So I understand where Trustee Stone is coming from, because I did have a ton of questions, and I'd like to thank Superintendent Davis for her patience in answering my many questions. And then at the second meeting, I'd like to thank Carrie as well for answering my many questions. I must say, I was concerned about the numbers that I saw in terms of capacity. There definitely is a lot of new development in the Brooklyn area. It's a very major area of growth. At the moment, the development is east of Donald A. Wilson primarily, and that is from Highway 2 to Roslyn, and then I'm sure further development further north of that. I did drive around the area here that we're talking about for the new school. We just have to keep in mind that a couple of things that jumped out at me. 40 of the students for the new school, the proposed school, are proposed. So that's something that I was a bit concerned about. The second thing is that this development that we're talking about, it could be 2 years, but it could be as much as 5 for this development. I do concur that there definitely are some concerns when you see a number like 52% capacity coming from the corporate sector. I don't think that I would probably be too popular with anybody coming in with a percentage like that. So I just want to say though that I am in favor of option A. I know there's some concerns in the Dr. Robert Thornton area around traffic and speeding, but in Whitby, that's been one of the major issues for the municipal people. So I don't see a problem with that. So in terms of the various options, I'm happy to go with recommendation of option A. I'm not sure if Trustee Templeton has any additional comments.
We'll go to Trustee Templeton, another Whitby trustee, offering his suggestions.
Actually, I concur with a lot of what Christine has been saying. I actually concur with what Michael said too, because I do agree. I've seen it in Oshawa because I work in Oshawa, and you can see the schools, and they're packed. So, but my only concern again was the traffic, as Christine or Trustee Thatcher mentioned, and that is with the municipality. So, again, I am agreeing with option A. So thank you.
Thank you. So I'm asking Trustee Thatcher, I'm looking at page 240, and the recommendation is that the Durham District School Board approve option A as the approved boundary for unnamed North Whitby Public School, effective September 2021. Provided as Appendix A is a map outlining the boundary for the unnamed North Whitby Public School. Trustee Thatcher, you're putting forward that motion?
Yes, I'll put that motion forward.
Thank you. Seconded by Trustee Templeton. Any further comments or questions? Then I ask everyone to vote by please using the green check mark, please.
Thank you, Trustee Forbes.
Motion is carried. Are there any opposed? Thank you. Motion carries. Moving on to a few information items. The first one, we are going to go to Associate Director David Wright, and he's going to tell us about a bell time review.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
In accordance with board procedure, information on school bell times is being brought to you for your information. A significant bell time review was undertaken in 2017 And since that time, there have only been a few minor changes made. There are a fairly significant number of bell time changes being required for next school year, but the nature of the changes are still minor in that it's a very small adjustment being made. The detailed list of schools impacted is included in your package. And the only other piece I'd like to mention this evening is that though the Ministry of Education has highlighted that planning for next school year should reflect a return back to a status quo, the situation remained fluid as there is a great deal of uncertainty about what school will look like next year. Bell times were temporarily changed for our secondary panel to accommodate scheduling in this school year, and similar changes may be required again next year as well. Joining us this evening is Kelly Mashulian, CAO for DSTS, and both of us would be happy through you, Madam Chair, to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments regarding the bell time review? And I see Trustee Barnes.
Thank you. I have a question in regards to a couple of my schools or Ajax schools, or even not even just Ajax. They're changing the morning bell times, but there's no change towards the PM. So how are we making up that 5 to 10 minutes that we're making the change from the morning if we're still ending at the same time?
Through you, Madam Chair, can I direct that question to Kelly, please?
Sure. So part of the review this year was an analysis on the instructional day, and we worked closely with David and Heather Monday on ensuring that there was a proper balanced instructional day, along with some streamlining of breaks. So trying to make the recesses a mixture of 10 and 15 minutes, depending upon the school, and 1 hour lunch times. So that was part of the analysis we did this year, which means that the instructional day that's being offered within all of those schools is in line with the DDSB and the Ministry of Education. But I'm sure David or Heather could probably answer more of the instructional day questions.
Through you, Madam Chair, perhaps I'll just remind trustees that we had to, for this year, we couldn't change busing times, but we did recognize that we had some confusion in terms of the implementation of specific bell times. And that was an issue we had to work through as a system. So some of these changes are actually reflective of us having to, because the instructional minutes are within the collective agreement. So we needed to accommodate bell times. And so this is now being reflected. We tried to work it through this year, and now it's an accurate showing in terms of the expectation of instructional time.
Trustee Barrett, I did see your hand up. It has gone down.
And sorry, Chair Morton, I'll just clarify, not instructional time, supervision time.
Okay, thank you. I just have one comment. I find it really interesting where we have our earliest students beginning class at 8 a.m. and then the later ones are now going in as late as 9:15. So there's a 75-minute spread there. And I'm hoping that those little people can get to school and be wide awake at 8. Any other questions or comments? Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, Chair Morton, and through you. I have the same question actually that Patrice had, because I recognize the fact that we've reduced the time, changed the time in the morning, but the later time and at the end of the day is the same. And we do have collective agreements that indicate that there are 300 minutes of instructional time, which is, I think, what you were referring to, Kelly. But I'm sorry, Director Marsh, I missed your comment around the supervision time, because in my mind I was trying to I was thinking of the instructional time. So would you mind very much repeating that? Sorry.
Thank you. So the bell time adjustments reflect the supervision time. within the collective agreements. And you may recall that in elementary schools specifically, we did have to do an adjustment in terms of supervision time. And therefore, it was too late to change it in terms of the busing for this year. So this is now reflective of the supervision time that is within the agreement.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further comments, questions? Bell time. I see trustee Edwards.
I understand the changes for this, and I don't have a problem with change, but I'm just concerned about bell time creep, in that each year we get a list of 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and then it's sort of saying when, you know, over 10 minutes we get, and it's just happened enough that I'm just a little concerned that when we get these reports, it would be interesting to see is that, yeah, we know what it was last year and what we want to propose next year. But I just would like the information as far as to ensure that we're not allowing bell time creep to happen, so that we're changing bell time of a school, you know, 20 minutes to 25 minutes over a series of years. I'm just a little concerned.
Associate Director Wright, do you want to comment?
If it assists going forward when we bring this report in January, we can benchmark the 2017 bell time review, the year in which significant bell time changes were made, just as a comparison.
That would be helpful. Thanks.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you.
Thank you kindly. We will move on again to Associate Director Wright, who will provide us with an interim financial report.
Thank you very much, Chair. The report that you have this evening reflects our revised estimate submission, which was submitted to the Ministry of Education last month, December 2020. I would say that there is positive news in our interim financial report this year overall, in that though there are many boards around the province that are struggling with enrollment difficulties, our board has seen a very positive net increase of almost 400 students over projections. Section 3.2 of your report highlights the areas of significant change in our revenue line, netting an increase of almost $16 million to a total of $829.4 million in our operating budget. The net increase in enrollment over projections provides a positive revenue increase. Our estimate submission included the notion that staff in the year was anticipated to be at a greater experience level than what we ended up hiring. And as a result, the revenue to offset the cost of that qualification and experience was reduced. And the most significant change to our revenues came through funding that different levels of government have provided to us to help navigate operations through the COVID-19 pandemic. The net increase in revenue is being offset with an estimated $15.8 million in additional operating expense. More specifically, the aggregate cost of new teaching and early childhood educator staff hired this year was lower than anticipated, as mentioned in the revenue section, commensurate with that decrease in funding. Additional elementary school staff were hired to support increased enrollment. And the largest area of increase is, of course, related to the COVID-19 pandemic and related supports. Sports to help the system operate during this pandemic consist of additional staffing, technology, ventilation, transportation, PPE, health and safety, etc. In addition to the changes to our operating budget, there have been significant changes to our capital budget as well, including new capital approvals, which are highlighted in section 3.3 of your report. In relation to where our operating spending is to date as a percentage of our budget, we are a little behind what we would normally expect to see. That being said, our budget includes salaries based on anticipated ratified collective agreements and subsequent retroactive salary costs. As the timing of the revised estimate submission, there were a number of collective agreements that remained outstanding, and therefore the salary amounts had not yet been paid. So that's the report, Madam Chair. Jennifer Machin, one of our senior finance managers, is joining us this evening. And if you have any questions through you, we will do our best to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Trustee Barrett's hand is up.
Yeah, two quick questions if I could through you, Madam Chair. The one, David, on page 317, the retirement gratuities, a net gain of 800,000. It's saying it's decrease on the draw on retirement gratuity reserves. Is that, I'm just trying to understand that. Is that because less people retired to take the gratuity, or that there was a recalculation of the gratuity?
Through you, Madam Chair. Jennifer, would you mind addressing that, please?
Certainly, and through you, Madam Chair, as Trustee Barrett mentioned, it was due to a recalculation. What we do is we look at everyone eligible for the retirement gratuity, and we actually had greater numbers retire in the previous year than expected. So we had to readjust our estimates.
Because your future liabilities will be less because they took it a year early in your
Correct.
estimates?
Correct.
Okay, Jennifer, you're going to hate me on the audit committee. I'm going to
Nope,
tell you. So
not at all.
And just another, sorry, David, you're going to have to put up with me as well. So, and Paul, by the way. Just last question. On the same page 317, we talked about the PPF funding, custodial staffing supports almost $1.8 million. So is it fair to say that we spent that additional dollars on hiring additional custodial staff? Is that where the dollars were spent?
Yes, Trustee Barrett, that is where the additional dollars were spent on additional custodial staffing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for those answers. Are there any other questions? I will go to Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton. I'm on page 324, and I'm just wondering, it's just a question around clarification, Associate Director Wright. Just wondered if you could explain to me about the major variance from the estimates to the revised estimates in the facility upgrades area. There's a couple of areas. The school condition improvement facility upgrades was the major one. I think we estimated 19 million, and we revised to 33. Just wondering what would the reason for that be?
Through you, Madam Chair. Jennifer, can you address those, please?
Certainly. So at the time of estimates, we estimate the timelines of when we think we'll be spending the funding. So as we have more up-to-date information at revised estimates, that's just updated.
So we upgraded more facilities than what we originally expected in the time frame.
Our expenses will be higher, exactly, within the time frame than we originally thought they would be.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Associate Director Wright. And I'm seeing no other questions. And I'm looking at our information items and I'm thinking David Wright is a very informative person this evening because he's on next with a supplementary funds summary. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I apologize. Director Marsh highlighted she front-ended the report. Unfortunately for you all, I'm heavy loading the back end of the meeting this evening. So on to our supplementary financial information. The information in this report is aligned with the information from the previous report from a timing perspective, and that it's up to date to the beginning of December. This report generally brings information on grants that have been received outside of the grants for student needs. The bulk of these grants used to be known as EPO grants, or Education Program Other, and over the last 2 years now they've been known as PPF grants, or Partnership and Priority Grants. These grants are usually intended to support targeted programs and Ministry of Education priorities through the pilot stage before they either roll into the grants for student needs or they time out. This year, the bulk of the PPF grants were flowed to support operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. The grants that make up the amount in your report are highlighted in the appendix. And if you have any questions through you, Madam Chair, Jennifer and I'd be happy to try and answer them for you. Thank you.
Thank you. I will look for hands. And I'm seeing none. So I thank both of you for your report. Well done. Thank you, Jennifer. Moving on. Secondary staffing update. Let's go to Superintendent. No, I'm sorry, Associate Director, acting position, Jimmy Markowski.
Thank you, Trustee Morton, and through you, the report can be found on page 328 of your package this evening. Previously, we had highlighted to trustees that we were examining options to accommodate secondary students who opted for attending DDSB at home after the initial registration window was closed. We also shared with you that we had overstaffed secondary staffing to accommodate pathways in both in-person schools and DDSB at home. The purpose of the report this evening is to provide trustees with an update on our secondary staffing that builds on the information that was shared in the fall. In August, we surveyed families to determine the number of students choosing to register for DDSB at home. In order to support and accommodate the growing number of students seeking to attend DDSB at home following the initial deadline of August 13th, the deadline to register DDSB at home was extended to September 2nd. The chart on the second page of your report highlights the shift in registration numbers. February 2021 marks the start of quadmester 3, and to date, an additional group of over 1,300 secondary students have requested to transfer to DDSB at home for quadmester 3. There's also a slight attrition in secondary enrollment during the second part of the school year, as many senior students have completed their graduation requirements during the first half. The difference in numbers is explained by that factor. Due to the late influx of students to DDSB at home in quadmesters 1 and 2, an additional 50 LTO teachers were hired to accommodate course options, ensuring that equitable access to all courses was provided. For quadmesters 3 and 4, we will be reducing these staffing costs at DDSB at home by 15 FTE and will require an additional 35 LTO teachers instead of the 50 that were required during the first 2 quadmesters. And this will ensure viability of programming in both in-person and virtual schools. Overall, this will generate an additional expense of 42.5 FTE teachers for the district that would be addressed through inter-year operational savings and federal funding provided to support operations during the pandemic. Prioritizing viable programming and a healthy selection of course options for all students has been a priority at both DDSB at home and our in-person schools. Schools have made timetabling decisions in an effort to minimize any significant impact on student pathways. And I do want to recognize our secondary school teams in terms of leading the timetabling and course selections during the course of this year, in particular with the challenge that have been experienced through the pandemic. We are confident that our focus on equity has ensured that we respect the importance of pathways programming and maintained a breadth of course offerings at the secondary school level to meet the needs of both our in-person and virtual learners. That is my report this evening. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Trustee Edwards?
As mentioned in the report, the impact is around electives and the number of electives offered. And I'm just wondering 2 things. Is that what impact, because this has now been going on for a while, the impact of students being able to complete specialist high school majors credits in order to get that designation for that CHISM, as well as, again, the impact for students with special needs who, again, rely heavily, we know, that participate in these electives, and the impact of moving forward on to a possible vocation or into a trade.
Thank you, and through you, Chair Morton, Trustee Edwards, you bring forward a valid concern. When we engage in this process, we, through the operations department, we actually work with our DDSB at home principals and the principals of the in-person schools to really examine the pathways. We made sure that courses that were senior courses that were required for graduation or any specialized programs that you had mentioned was minimum. in certain schools where we felt that it would make a significant impact, we've left staffing there to ensure that those pathways were accommodated. I do have a breakdown of sort of how it is that each school was impacted, but I do want to say it was predominantly some elective courses, and schools became very creative to make sure that, as I mentioned, some of those essential pathways were not touched.
Just additional comment is, I mean, if this continues on and we continue not to be allowed to have the electives, I just have concerns where the ministry is going to maybe allow eventually students to come back to get those so that they can complete a SHISM or complete in order to be move on to their perceived pathways. It's just the longevity of this the pandemic and the impact will have notes. But again, I think the ministry has to look at that, or as you said, maybe having students come back, being the ability to come back for a 5th year in order to complete that practical application of what they're supposed to be learning in these electives.
Thank you, Acting Associate Director Markovsky, for your report. Moving on, we are going to hear about trustee expenses. Back to Associate Director Wright.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Trustee expenses are reimbursed based on policy and regulation on trustee expenses, and on an annual basis, trustee expenses are brought for disclosure to a public meeting of the board. Item 3 in your report is a summary list of trustee expenses by category, both regular annual expenses as well as discretionary expenses. If you have any questions at all through you, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to try and answer them. Thank you.
Questions regarding trustee expenses? I'm seeing no questions or comments. Then we'll move on to an update on those trustee expenses. Back to you, Associate Director Wright.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. In an attempt to address issues that have been raised by trustees, we're bringing this report forward regarding travel on board business and publication of trustee expenses for your information. Additionally, after reviewing the policy and regulation, as well as other board documents on expense-related matters, it's become clear that there is room to add clarity within this policy. As part of the governance transition from regulation to policy and procedure, staff will be undergoing a jurisdictional review of trustee expense policies and procedures, and will bring drafts based on leading practice forward for the consideration of trustees. And again, through you, Madam Chair, if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them. Thank you.
Okay. I see Michael Barrett's hand up. So Trustee Barrett.
Yes, and through you, Madam Chair, thank you, Associate Director Wright, for bringing this forward, because I know that there's been some questions over the last little while with regards to expenses and the need for and the desire for further clarity. As I did mention in an email that I had circulated earlier today, I do want to be able to put a motion on the floor with regards to trustee expenses, and in keeping with the same spirit of transparency that other boards are moving towards, I would like to be able to move that commencing January 1st, 2021, that the trustee expense summaries outlining each trustee's total spending amount will be posted on a quarterly basis to the board website, and this disclosure includes those expense reports of both the chair and the vice chair. So I'd like to be able to put that on the floor.
I have a question regarding that comment, Trustee Barrett. Our expenses now run from December the 1st to November.
Chair, there's a motion on the floor, so it has to be seconded. Sorry.
I just wanted clarification.
Yeah.
Do you mean from January the 1st to December 31st, or December the 1st to November the 30th?
Commencing January the 1st on a calendar basis. Yeah. Not going backwards, only going forward.
Okay.
For clarification, yeah.
Okay. We have a motion on the floor. Do we have somebody to second that motion? I see Trustee Stone, who is seconding that motion. Are there comments or questions? Trustee Edwards.
Just a clarification, when you're saying the publishing is, you mentioned expense reports for the chair and the vice chair, but you mean actually publishing all expense reports for individual trustees is included in that? It's just the way it's worded that wasn't clear.
Yes, for all trustees, trustee expenses, and including the chair and the vice chair. I looked at the other 4 large boards, and for some reason, Donna, they have explicitly laid out that the chair and the vice chair's expenses would be included. So to be quite honest, I copied their language. So yeah, but it's all trustees, including the offices, because I do recognize that there is a different protocol, the way the chair's expenses are approved. That may or may not be changed in the upcoming protocol. We'll wait for that process, but I just reflected that language that's in the other boards, Trustee Edwards.
We have a motion on the floor put forward by Trustee Barrett, seconded by Trustee Stone. Are there further comments or questions? If not, we will go directly to that vote. If you could indicate by that green check mark if you are in favor of that vote.
Chair Morton, could we not just use the yeses and the nos instead of having to go back and?
That's a good idea.
So,
either a green yes or a red no would be excellent. Thank you.
Saving 32 seconds.
Yeah.
I'll vote yes to that, Chair Morton.
Thank you. And that motion has passed. Thank you. Moving on to the quarterly construction and major projects progress report. Associate Director Wright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll save you for my voice this time, and I'll ask our Chief Facilities Officer, Christine Nascaville, to present this report to you this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. This is the quarterly construction report updating the progress on both new construction and major projects throughout the district. And if anybody has any questions about any of the items in the report, I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Trustee Barrett?
Sorry, I seem to be hanging after Mr. Wright here. So it's just a question, either through you, Associate Director Wright, or through you, Christine. Is just wondering about any of the impact that COVID has had on the construction and deadlines. I know from my own personal business that things are delayed considerably. The cost of construction materials have gone up. Labor is difficult with the parameters of the COVID regulations in the sense of what you're allowed to do, essential work and non-essential work. What's kind of your prediction on what this might do to construction projects or the costs of the projects on a go-forward basis?
Through you, Chair, right now what we are seeing is with the 2 new schools under construction, we're far enough along, we're not seeing any slowdowns. It is essential, so we can continue to have crews on site and working. A couple of the smaller projects that are happening, renovation projects, we are still moving ahead on those. We do have contractors on site at schools during this stay-at-home order because they are still essential to the operations of the school. What we are also seeing is some favorable costing as well that's coming through on some recent tenders. So at this point in time, we haven't had a large impact with COVID at this time.
Okay, thank you. The concept of being able to have favorable pricing would really be advantageous for the ministry to be able to approve that North Oshawa High School as well. So,
a question from Trustee Thatcher.
Thank you, Chair Morton, and through you. I just had a question on, it's not really anything to do with what's in your presentation, but it maybe is relative in a way. I have a school in Whitby, it's actually in Brooklyn, that I would love to suggest that some renovations are desperately needed. And I don't know how we go about doing that or who would be responsible for that. I'm sure there's a procedure in place. Would anyone have that information?
Through you, Chair, we do use various data to be able to collect the information to put together our priority list of the different renovations that are required as we take a look at the schools across the whole district. So while it may appear that one particular school is in need, there may be others that are in greater need. But definitely, if you have any concerns, if you'd like to provide some further details to me, but we absolutely do have different processes in place that we do our analysis to ensure that there is equity across the board of schools that are in need, are the ones where the funds are spent, whether it's accessibility, whether it's libraries, whether it's washroom renovations. We do that full analysis across all of the schools.
Okay, thank you, Christine. I'll be definitely doing that. I will connect with you.
Thank you. I have a question for you, Christine, and you probably know what that question is going to be. And that is about the Beaverton Thora rebuild. Originally, we were to have a new school that was to open this September. And now we're saying September 22. But if we soon don't get that final word from the province, we will not be able to open in September 22. What are your thoughts on that?
Thank you, Chair. That's definitely the case. So we will be getting to that point where we will be pushing another year, but we do have ongoing conversations, and I know we told you that every time we bring this progress report to you, but we do continue to have those conversations and answering the questions of ministry staff. They have told us that it has moved up to the next level, as with a few of our projects. So we really are at their mercy at this time, just waiting for approvals to come forward to us from them.
Thank you. I would just hate to put it off for another year. We have many challenges. Thank you, Christine, very much. Director Marsh, was your hand up? No. Okay, thank you. Moving on. An OPSPA report. I'm asking Trustee Barnes if she has an OPSPA report for us.
Yes, I'll just be quick. The Program and Policy Committee met on January 7th. We discussed education funding overview. We also discussed in detail the GSN consultation that we discussed it region by region so that we would have detailed information for input for the ministry. The deadline is today for the draft to be looked at, and it will be submitted to the ministry, giving them feedback and guidelines on the thoughts that we have around what our priorities are going forward and what should be funded within the GSN.
Thank you. Comments, questions? I was thinking this meeting was going to go until 10 o'clock. But I'm thinking it's not. There are no comments, no questions. Then I would like to make an announcement. If you're looking at your agenda at number 17, for your information, there is a listing of ad hoc committees there for the board. The minutes and the actions of these committees will be reported at standing committee and will come before the board via the standing committee meeting report. That's how it's going to work, and I hope everyone is in agreement with that.
So Madam Chair, we added an ad hoc committee tonight. So will that be added to the list then?
That would be added to the list. Yes.
Madam Chair, we also eliminated the incident ad hoc, so it'll be deleted from the list.
But we still will have that final report coming from standing, is my understanding.
No, we finished today.
Okay, so that would be removed from the list. Okay. Any other comments? Then I'm going to say, let's consider this meeting adjourned, and thank you for your time and your attention. Well done.
Good night.